On January 22, 1987, Pennsylvania State Treasurer Robert Bud Dwyer gave a press conference after being convicted of 11 counts of corruption. The year prior, it was discovered that the former representative took bribe money from a California computer software company, Computer Technology Associates, to secure a state contract. According to a 1989 article by David Olmos for the Los Angeles Times, State Treasurer Dwyer, quote, had agreed to accept a $300,000 kickback in return for awarding a $4.6 million contract to CTA without putting it out to bid. That January morning, the press had gathered at the Pennsylvania State Capitol in Harrisburg, expecting to receive Dwyer's notice of resignation as state treasurer. What followed was one of the most infamous and grisly acts of public suicide in American politics. After denying all responsibility in the corruption scandal, attacking state and federal officials who had sided with the federal grand jury, and comparing himself to the biblical figure of Job, Dwyer had produced 3 envelopes, which he gave to 3 of his staffers. He then withdrew a .357 Magnum revolver from a manila envelope. Members of the press, several staffers, and his cabinet tried to retrieve the pistol from the disgraced treasurer. He backed away from the crowd, growing more agitated. Ominously, he implored those who might be affected by his actions to leave the room. As several people attempted to stop him, he said his final words, "Don't. This will hurt someone." He quickly turned the gun to himself and pulled the trigger. 9 news outlets continued recording as the situation grew more volatile. The incident shook much of Pennsylvania, with Dwyer's suicide being broadcast across the state, sometimes without warning of the extremely graphic content. The footage of Bud Dwyer's suicide remains easily accessible via the internet. Punk bands have used the suicide to highlight the corruption and faux martyrdom of some American politicians. On YouTube, many exploitation-oriented channels have covered the event with titles like "R. Bud Dwyer Murdered by the State of Pennsylvania?", "The Bud Dwyer Incident," and "Horrific Suicide on Camera, R. Bud Dwyer." I highlight this event in history not out of a morbid sense of interest, but instead to show that the relationship we have with extreme violence as spectators is a symbiotic one. From one politician's desperate stunt to claim innocence, a small pseudo-culture of internet orbiters has emerged, using the event to propel forward a rapidly expanding genre of video content: true crime, or in Dwyer's specific case, true horror. On the internet, today's cultural capital can be distilled to content engagement. In the internet true crime horror subgenre, if it bleeds, it leads.
It's a simple concept, guys. If it bleeds, it leads.
If you were to open YouTube and search true crime, you will likely come across channels like JCS or Jim Can't Swim, a channel dedicated to psychological breakdowns of police interrogation footage. Explore With Us, a network of channels mostly devoted to criminal investigations, interrogations, and analyses of police body cam footage, as well as conventional storytelling channels like Coffee House Crime, Stranger Stories, Beyond Evil, or Red Tree Crime. From real-life tragedy, a market ripe for exploitation has emerged, and its viewership has expanded rapidly in the last few years, with audiences demanding even more fresh, bloody content. Our obsession with catastrophe is rooted in a desire for purpose. Art has often captivated the sense of purpose through its depictions of obliteration. Without this keen sense of morbid curiosity, Edgar Allan Poe would never have written the first detective fiction with 1841's The Murders in the Rue Morgue. Flannery O'Connor would never have made the link between violence and contrition in the face of God in works such as A Good Man is Hard to Find or Everything That Rises Must Converge, wherein violent confrontation brings about great spiritual and phenomenological change. With the advent of easily shareable and highly lucrative internet media, the exploitation of real-life violence rises to a level of meaninglessness that has not been seen since the Second Iraq War. Divorced from historical context, true crime and violence as entertainment medium becomes entirely transparent, and what remains is pure exploitation. With millions of eager viewers, family annihilations and infanticide become spectacle, not as part of a larger and contextually important narrative used to potentially solve these societal ills, but as spectacle unto themselves. This can be seen in the hardcore subgenre of true crime horror exploited by YouTube channels such as The Misery Machine and Disturbing. It only takes a brief glance at the video titles on these accounts to understand they're pandering to the platform's algorithms at the cost of the dignity of the victims described therein. And despite their attempts to humanize and remember the lives of those killed or abused in their videos, the victims' humanity is undermined in the pursuit of viewer engagement. But there is a disturbing irony to the dehumanization people face when their annihilation is exploited for ad revenue and audience engagement, namely the dehumanization of the exploiters themselves. As human tragedy is reduced to schlock narrative, the interpersonal value of human life decreases too. Tragedy becomes commodified and human beings become inanimate, objects, numbers, and characters instead of real people. Whatever humanity is inherent to personhood is undermined by their post-mortem exploitation. We all have a stake in this problem. Each of us is human, and we are all dealt a psychic blow when any of us is devalued to such selfish, attention-seeking extremes. This is not a question of artistic integrity. It is a question of human life and the truth of our existence. Without a unified rejection of this existentially hostile nihilism, we are left purposelessness, and the world we inhabit becomes stage for the further exploitation and degradation of the human spirit.